Hi, everybody. This is Rob Sentz. Thanks so much for joining us. Now that we're about 11 o'clock, I'll just get started. I think people, you know what, I'm going to give people a few more minutes here, not minutes, a few more moments to log in. I see a lot of people logging in right now. But while we wait, I just want to thank you all for joining us. This has been a real long endeavor, and it's awesome to finally get this out and then to be talking to you about it. As we get started here, I'd also like to introduce my co-presenters. So I'll start with Yustina. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hello everybody. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Hey,
Yep.
Yustina.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us. Do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself real quick for everybody?
absolutely. Yustina Saleh, I'm SVP of Analytics. I've been with Analytics for almost 3 years, with MZ for almost 3 years, and I'm very focused on helping people identify opportunities through a skill-based analysis, a personalized pathway, and we do that on the talent side for employers to find the best talent, for students to personalize and optimize their pathway, for workforce doing upskilling. So it's been an awesome 3 years.
Very cool. Thanks for joining us. And how about Claire?
Hi, I'm Clare Coffey. I joined MZ this past January. I'm a data journalist here, and I was the lead writer on Degrees at Work. So I was working very closely with Yustina and Rob and our graphic team to help bring it all together.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm Rob Sentz. I'm the innovation officer here at MZ. And again, it's a pleasure to have you join us today. So let's get right into it. The first thing we want to talk about is why we did this. For years, a big issue here at MZ has been, we've done labor market data for almost 20 years. And every time we got involved with projects or built any kind of product or did any kind of consulting, one of the responses to our work has always been, it'd be great if you could help me better understand what my students do after they graduate. And for a long time, we didn't really have much of an answer. And as you might know, if you've followed MZ for the past few years, that's been our focus. And we've now cultivated and built a lot of data to help know the outcomes of degrees. And we've really been at this for about 3 years now, and this is the first time we've done a comprehensive study that explores the outcomes of a lot of different degrees all at the same time. So it was a great thing. We've wanted to do this for years, and we know that a lot of you have wanted us to do this type of work, so it was great to get this out here. A lot of this work relates to this need to deal with, if you're not familiar, the instructional program codes that come from the government sources and the SOC codes that come from the government sources, essentially the program to occupation mapping that we have here in the States, which has been really helpful for a long time. But when we think about certain degrees, like a history degree or an English degree, it's very hard to map that program over to occupation. So this is now allowing us to deal with that mapping problem. A big part of it has been, we know that the narrative in the United States and even globally has been there are certain degrees that are really worthwhile and there are certain degrees that are not, right? The IT degree, the nursing degree, anything in the STEM area, that has a lot of value, but the humanities, the liberal arts, social sciences, those are somewhat suspect. And a lot of it is because of that second point, right? We don't have a strong crosswalk for the English degree, but we have a strong crosswalk for the accounting degree. So we have anecdotes, right? Anytime you don't have good information, you have anecdotes. So we wanted to get away from anecdotes and see, is it true that certain degrees are better than others in terms of outcomes? We also have been working heavily on the idea of skills. And we've built out a skills-based approach to looking at the economy, which is really reliant on skill clustering. And you're gonna see more and more of this from MZ over time. And what it's doing is it's allowing us to sort of blow through the taxonomic wall that has limited us for a long time and we still like the taxonomy, but we want to get through it. We want to get past it because we know that when you're building curriculum, when you're hiring somebody, when you're trying to write a job posting, when you're building a resume, when you're building curriculum, the rigid taxonomy, software developer one, accountant, those sorts of structures aren't super helpful when we really get into the reality of work. So we want to talk about that a little bit and present that. And honestly, it's just cool. We think this data is really interesting to look at. It's cool to visualize. It's cool to talk about. It's great to write about. And it's even better to share it with you and to give you some handles where you now can begin to use it in your work. Okay, let's talk about MZ for a second, just to make sure everybody is familiar. So anytime you start any project or talk to people about something like data, you want to first make sure you know why you're talking about it. And MZ's why has been and still is, we want to create data for this idea of economic prosperity. And when we talk about economic prosperity, a lot goes into it, but what we're talking about here is actually aligning these economic ecosystems, these workforce ecosystems that really dominate and define our country. And the simplest and best way to think about it is where we look at the idea of people and work trying to find each other and them struggling to find each other and needing higher education to kind of fill and bridge those gaps because it's knowledge and skills that they're after. And so we want to have a relationship between people, education, and work in specific places. And what we talk a lot about here whenever we talk about this problem is that many of our places are massive, right? The New York City economy is as big as Canada, economically speaking. You multiply place after place after place, and it's like we have nations within our nation. And that makes it very hard for educators to understand what they should be building, for people to understand what they should be learning and what they should be pursuing, and for businesses to actually find people and connect with the right educators who can help them. So we believe that data helps address this supply and demand issue in novel, unique, and powerful ways. That's MZ's why, and that's very much the underpinning of our work. It's also important for you to understand that for the past year, we've been working closely with Strata. Strata Education Network is our new parent company. About a year ago, or a little more than that now, we joined with Strata. They are a national nonprofit with a clear focus on this idea of connecting people to the labor market and helping them complete their education with more purpose and understanding. And that really jives well with what MZ's after, which is, we're focused on the idea of labor market analytics that fundamentally create better ways that you all can connect people, education, and work together. So that's MZ and Strata working together, and this is sort of the problem now. This is a great way to think about it. A couple slides ago, we presented the idea of connecting people, education, and work, and the problem that we have there in many cases is this idea that we need to have a language that connects them, right? A lot of times when we talk about connecting people, education, and work, you can fall back to your Amazon or your Uber or even your eHarmony illustration. Why don't we just move person from point A to point B? Why don't we just go look here to find people? Well, it's harder than that. And a lot of times it's because these circles don't actually speak the same language. They have very different cultures. They have very different ways of interacting. And so to move somebody from one of these circles to another it's considerable effort. And we think that a lot of that effort revolves around the difficulty people have in transitioning their language from one place to another. And so we think that the skills language, so using skills as a language, as a common language, will help us do this. We need to talk about this a lot more, but I want to make sure that we're familiar with this concept. And this first edge between education and work, we want to begin to relate skills to curriculum. So we want to relate a demand signal in the market back to curriculum, and skills is a good way to do that. Up on the top portion, and this is really what Degrees at Work, this study is focused on, is helping everyone better understand what people do in work. In this case, we looked at the outcomes of people in terms of their degree for what jobs they have. And we want to relate the skills of the grads to their work to better understand the structure and nature of that. And then this final part is we want to help students relate their education and their skills to in-demand needs. And this is helping people actually value their education in new ways and apply it to work. I think this is a great structure and a great way to think about it. So I just want you to understand that, keep that in the back of your mind. There's still a lot more to unwrap here, but this is, again, a good way to think about what EMSI's after. What's cool about it, so if we look at the top edge, again, number 2, outcomes and relating the skills of grads to work, we can now even do it for the liberal arts, which is awesome. Last year with Strata, we engaged in our first big project of this nature, where we looked at the actual outcomes of the liberal arts, this broad category of education that is somewhat dubious in nature because we don't easily have ways of saying what you do with these types of degrees. And here's what we found, right? We see them have pretty productive outcomes, but they're very divergent. There's very diverse. There's a huge array of outcomes, which makes it hard to just talk about it in simple terms. But this is what we found, and in many ways, this is what the economy looks like. The biggest observation we made here is how many of them actually go into marketing roles. And if you know anything about marketing, it's a very big in-demand need in the economy. And so to say that the liberal arts degree doesn't have a good outcome is a little bit of a, it's a false premise, because it actually has a good outcome. The problem might be that the students coming out of those programs aren't as well informed as they should be about what they can actually do with their degree. The name of the degree isn't the name of the job, and that makes it hard. So we need to work on ways of improving that. Okay, so let's talk about degrees at work. Now, I've hopefully given you enough background. If I haven't, I'm happy to talk to you more and dig into EMSI and all of our work. But let's talk about this research now. What we did to do it is we observed the job activity of about 1 million people. So we used about 1 million professional profiles. EMSI has a database of about 125 million professional profiles and resumes. And what we did is we extracted those where we could at least see 3 jobs. We have a bachelor's degree, and we could actually sense what degree they had, right? So for instance, if you have a resume or a profile out on the web, you typically will list your job and your degree, and you'll list who you work for. And that's what we did. So we looked for those things, and we extracted ones that we thought were pretty clean for us to analyze. When we did it, we broke our categories down into these. We broke them down into people that have either a language and philosophy degree, which is sort of the core of liberal arts, and that's your English and your philosophy and so on, and the social sciences, which is a pretty broad collective of degrees. And that's where most people are pretty critical of those, right? If you tell your Uncle Joe you're going to major in English, you're going to get some, some squints. Are you sure about that? Then we have 2 degrees that are somewhat applied, business and communications. If you say you're going to major in business or comms, people are like, okay, that seems like you can get a job with that. And then 2 that are really highly applied, engineering and IT. If you tell somebody you're majoring in engineering, they pat you on the back and say, way to go. Although Yustina, who was an engineering major, told me that that's not what her family said. But generally, this is it. And so this is fun because now we can actually compare all these things against each other. All right, here's what we found. Across everything we analyzed, we found that the top outcomes of every single degree was roles in sales, marketing, management, and business operations. And that's probably somewhat surprising. And we're going to talk about this more in a second. But of all the outcomes we analyzed, these were the most common across every degree. Whether you have an English degree or an IT degree, we saw a lot of these. What we reduced those down to are some really critical roles, which we're going to call business roles. We see a lot of people going into tactical communication, strategic communication, interpersonal oversight, and operational oversight. Tactical communication is essentially your sales roles. Strategic communication is essentially marketing roles. Interpersonal oversight is your management roles where you're working with people and you have your things like even your HRs in there. And an operational oversight are even where the numbers come into play, your accounting, your finance, all the systems that companies use. Yep.
It's captured by that.
Yep, a lot of consulting. It's all those systems that companies need to operate better. And again, what we found for each one of those areas is there is a tech-like demand. When I say tech-like demand, what I mean is the demand for those jobs as big as tech is in the economy. And I think it's something we don't talk about enough, so we want to talk about it more. 54% of all the profiles we analyzed went into these key business functions. Okay, and I think that's a big deal. I think that's a major finding. 25% of them went to STEM, and then 21% went to other. So regardless of the degree, and regardless of the specificity of the degree, we see a huge amount of people heading into these business functions. And I think there's several reasons for it. We're going to talk about that. This is the way we visualized it, and I think this is called our Super Sankey. We love these Sankey charts. They communicate a lot. But a couple things I want you to notice here is if you look at the language, social science, business, and comms degree, look at the thickness of those green bars heading into those business functions, this tactical, strategic, operational, and interpersonal oversight. Many of the people going into those critical business functions are coming from those 4 degree areas: your philosophy and language, social science, business, and comms. You even see a lot of people from engineering and IT going into those areas. And what's also interesting is you see even people from social sciences. We observe people from language philosophy going in STEM, and then you see people even going to the interpersonal creative jobs. So again, there's a lot of nonlinearity in the market, and this data is showing it. Once people hit the labor market, they move in all kinds of places and ways, and we need to be comfortable with that. So that's the outcome piece. So we trace the outcomes, and we also trace the skills. And the skills piece is, I think it's important. It's a little harder to understand than the outcomes, but over time, this is something we need to dig more and more into. In this piece here, what we did is we took a look at the skills that most frequently occurred across the, essentially the 1 million profiles we analyzed. And these are the major things we observed. Across everything, we see a lot of people involved in this kind of the green area, which we refer to as marketing and communication. And a lot of it, what they're doing is writing and marketing strategies. In the white area, you see a lot of sales and business admin, and particularly you see skills like purchasing and business development. And in the blue area, you see a lot of the management, strategic planning and project management. And again, I think what's important here is we don't want to bifurcate and necessarily pit one degree against another, because what we see happening is we see a total collision between what you think comes from the humanities and what comes from your STEM together. So in many of these business roles, if we go back one, I think a good way to think about the business role, it is pulling pieces from the STEM area and then from the interpersonal and creative area into itself. It needs both. It's vital that it has both. And I think that's why you see this great preponderance of degrees heading into it. It really has a thirst for both. Does that make sense, Yustina?
Yeah, and it actually doesn't mean that they go into business, so everything they learned in engineering and IT is wasted, or vice versa. When they go, and because we have the ability to clearly read their major and to clearly see all the skills that they are adding along the way and all of the jobs that they are adding, we can very clearly see that this is a business role, but it's actually very much on the product management and marketing side. This is a business role, but it actually very much require it is in an engineering setup where, like, the product manager of medical devices, for example, that person had to have a degree in engineering to be able to perform this function. And actually, why we did all this is that top level code is not helpful unless you start to dig in and look at the skills and see how these skills are coalescing together. And hopefully this will help institutions as they try to advise students better to sort of optimize their pathway in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. There, again, a lot more to unwrap here, but I think these high-level findings are a good starting point. to get involved with that. Get involved with that work and help institutions, help businesses, and help regions think about this more clearly. Okay, so let's now get into some more of our analysis. In this case, what we did is, I think a major reason we see so many people flowing into those 4 areas of work, the sales, the marketing, the operational, and the interpersonal oversight, is because they're massive and they need people, and their growth is as much as IT. So we looked at the growth trends for those 4 areas and just compared them to IT for the past 10 years. And we talk so much about technology and the need for IT, and it's true and it's valid. But look at these 4 other areas. They're as big as IT, and they have a tremendous demand for people. So we need to be able to talk about this. We need to be comfortable talking about this, and we need to realize that the market is getting these people from these less career specific degrees. That's where they're coming from. Another way to look at it is here. Essentially, we have millions of new jobs created over the past 10 years in these categories. Okay, there's another way to look at it. Again, some of the big ones here, see, management is massive. When you read job postings, almost every job posting talks about the need they have for people who can manage, to lead other people, to lead projects, to lead processes. And in many cases, they're finding people who can have the ability to manage, and they're comfortable from the social science and the liberal arts and business and communications degrees. But it's interesting because if you think about the engineering and the IT degree, they want that degree, but they also want the qualities they're getting from the social science and liberal arts degree. They want it in the same person. One other way to look at this, so we saw that there's demand, right? This is one of my explanations for why so many people are going to this. Again, we see growth and we see compensation. So if we think about what compensation is really the truest measure of supply and demand, because it's telling you the market is willing to pay for it. We know the market is willing to pay for IT degrees, but it's also willing to pay for these management positions, marketing, sales, and business and financial analysis positions, right? It's super important. The pay is pretty comparable across these positions.
And we actually also found that it's not just that category occupation. We found a lot of variation within each of these types, and it's very, very dependent on skills. So we are actually doing a lot of work to start to show the value of a prospective micro-credential. You know, if a person is here with these skills and they add project management, how different are the salaries offered by employers with and without that level of micro-credential. So and again, that's why we want to dig in the skills to be able to target and inform the advising and you know, program realignment in a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great things about being able to dig into the skills on this project is when we're looking at something like sales, where there's a ton of variation, we look at the skills of the people involved, you know, who graduate with liberal arts degree and go into sales, we can see, okay, they seem to be doing a lot of financial sales. Mm-hmm. So we can sort of use that to guide our estimations of their prospective wages. That's a whole other level that, you know, just the career alone does not provide.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great points. So we're going to actually dig into that here more in a second. So this is let's break it down a little bit more, and let's take a closer look at the actual outcomes and skills of each degree. All right, so here's our first, our first attempt at that. This is the outcomes of language and philosophy grads. So again, here's your philosophy or English student, and this is actually what they do. And no surprises, what we see there at the top, we see a lot of education. A lot of them are going into education, and then second, journalism, public relations, sales, and then marketing. What we observed here is what many of you aren't surprised by is this top bar. A lot of them here. But if you think about it, most people from these degrees don't go into education. they're actually going into the greater preponderance of careers underneath that. And then once they get into those careers, look at their movements. These lines are showing their movement in and out of different jobs. And what we thought was most striking here is for people who go into marketing, many of them stay, and then marketing tends to pick up a lot of people from other jobs as time marches. So essentially, the marketing career is highly magnetic for these language and philosophy grads. That's our major observation on that one.
And also very, very diverse. There's not one size fits all for marketing.
Yep.
It just like Rob explained, it can be very strategic and strategic communication directed. It can be very much geared towards software. It can be all data and digital analytics is becoming very, very digitized. So there are a lot of variations, and these shifts and just observing the competition at each level and who exactly they're competing with. And in here, you know, the language and philosophy will be competing with people from business in this area and from other majors. What is it that they can acquire? What are the skills that they can acquire that would make them more competitive in that field, should it be what they are targeting?
Absolutely. That's a great point. So let's jump over. So what we have here is a view of the job outcome. Now let's blow through that a little bit and think about, now what are they actually doing? So this is a different way to look at the work. Previous, what we've had is we have, you know, a program, you've studied English and you work in marketing. And that's fine. And that's still like, that seems pretty low level. But when we actually get down into it from a more subatomic point of view, we can actually break down what they actually do in marketing or education, for instance. So what we're doing here is cluster analysis to look at the skills of the people in those jobs. And Yustina, do you want to talk a little bit about what cluster analysis is?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very, very organic approach to understanding roles. So we have the SOC codes, and we all this is our initial framework, but we sort of group a lot of these occupation categories into something like, okay, these occupations are related to marketing, these occupations are related to civil engineering, and then with that we go in with a processor that is basically blind to all these taxonomies. We don't look at any of these taxonomies, and we don't have any preconceptions about how the roles will coalesce. And we wait for the output, and the output says we are seeing 4 roles here. And the roles will have, like, you know, the most critical skills in that first role is something related to training and development, and graphic design, and some project management. Here it is more on there is a lot of marketing here, there's project management and marketing communication. So from there you start to get clues about each of these roles, and that's how we start to group them into what we call themes. So that this is the higher theme. So if I am a student, and you know, I hear that a lot of people like me, I'm majoring in philosophy, and I see that educational technologies and educational product design is one of a very, very prominent outcome. Well, this is an exciting field. What can I do to get there? And so a lot of it, yes, it is an exciting field, but it actually requires a lot of technical skills. Like it requires very, very strong logic. It requires some web development skills, and managing a project. So what if, as I know this, I am able to, you know, as I'm curating my degree, I'm selecting the electives that will help me be more competitive in this area. That's all we are trying to do here. There are so many possibilities. It's not like 1 or 2. It's not language become English teachers and philosophy become philosophers. It actually is far from this picture. But then if we know that the possibilities are sometimes too many, what can a student do, and how would the advising be reoriented in a way that that sort of give them the ability to optimize and personalize their own pathway?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot. Yeah, that's pretty complex. But essentially, what we're doing here is saying we know their work outcomes, but let's look at their outcomes in terms of what they actually do from their skills point of view. So here we have 4 different major categories we observed when we performed cluster analysis on all these profiles. And so the first was this idea of we know that they work in education, but what are they doing? The thing that we observed most was they're doing this education product design, instructional design, right? They're helping design curriculum, they're helping to design programs. That was actually pretty interesting.
It's very surprising because I thought, oh, of course, this is what we all intuit. They're all becoming elementary teachers.
Yeah. They're not just, it's this design thinking that's going into the actual teaching and instruction is what emerged most strongly. The second thing was a lot of them are actually, we know that they're working in marketing, but a lot of them are working in the area of public relations. And we can actually see a lot of the activities they're doing. This is a lot of strategic communication. In this similar way, they're in digital marketing. And you can see some of the key skills that we saw pop out prominently. And then the final piece is this idea that they're involved with this massive category of nonprofit administration. This is everything from schools to, think many of you work for nonprofits. This is a big part of the economy. And this is where they're finding their niche, which is pretty cool to see. It's a completely different way of looking at it rather than just purely occupation. It's a skills perspective. Okay, now let's compare this to the social science degree. And this is an interesting one because there's a lot more specialization happening in the social science degree versus the language and the philosophy degree. Here we see sales as being the top outcome. And then again, that area, that nonprofit work is second. That nonprofit work is probably not surprising given that it's social sciences. But then again, we see marketing show up. Marketing is the third or the fourth job, and it becomes a third most popular job by the 3 jobs into the market. And then we also see even the business and financial analysis, HR, there's management. So we see strong banding. So you see a lot of thick bands. So a lot of them specialize, they stay in field, but then there's also quite a bit of movement. Big reason for that is I think social science, there's a lot of different degrees that feed into social sciences. So, you have econ, you have history, sociology, and so on. So you see some, again, strong specialization. Here are the major roles. So we saw sales as being the strongest theme for them, and then the social services after that. And then there's your digital marketing, and then your business and financial roles. And I think there's a lot of these. There's a lot going on under the surface of all this data. We're trying to create simple visuals to communicate it. But Claire, you made an interesting observation about the difference between social science and liberal arts when we look at this.
What was very interesting to me looking at this was seeing when liberal arts grads go into service-oriented nonprofits, their skills look a lot like someone who's sort of steering the organization. They're budgeting, they're writing grants, they're doing a lot of sort of top level and management and communication stuff. When social science grads go into these nonprofits, they're really doing a much more direct service provision. Mm-hmm. They're doing therapy, they're doing substance abuse. So, I did not predict that myself. I didn't have any intuition about that. And so that's always exciting when you see something that you could not have known just from anecdotes. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing was to see that, oh my gosh, this is the exact same sort of career bucket, but when we look under the hood, very different things are going on mm-hmm. by degree.
Yep. Yeah, they're working in the same area, but they're filling different niches. And that's really kind of fascinating to see how different degrees can relate to each other once they get into the market. Social services, these nonprofits, they want both of those people, right? And they fill different roles and they have different values. So we have to be careful about pitting one against the other because they actually go into the same areas and fill different niches, which are critical. We wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other.
And suddenly we see that all this focus on general education requirements, or these the core courses, which becomes sort of this is the requirement and you got to do it, and that's all. If students first see that these courses are actually the most critical in their getting their jobs, and all that logical thinking and all that, how it is helping them transition through the skills. I think and also as these curricula are being designed to see how they are finally relating in the job market and how they can be more applied. I think all these dynamics can offer a lot of potential in a really targeted education. It still needs to be an education, not just here's training. It needs to be wholesome, and we are seeing exactly that wholesome education that they got makes their outcomes very versatile, sometimes too versatile. But there are a lot of opportunities and how you can balance between too much versatility and getting that specificity and that consistency in the outcomes that we are seeing a little bit more in the social science outcomes, as they are a little bit more specialized. The lines are thicker, and if they see that level of specialization, and that every step, then they are making a markup. Like there's the wages that they're making in step one, as they build on it, and it is still a marketing, they make more than a person who's coming with 3 years experience outside the field of marketing. They will have an advantage and will have a higher salary. So that can help also, again, with strategizing both the career, the training, and the education pathways very well.
Okay, let's talk about communications a little bit. This was an interesting one because it's probably the one with the biggest like tectonic shift in it. You can see most of the profiles we analyzed here actually occur in the top 3 job categories. But then, journalism and public relations being the top area where they start, but then very quickly, just by the second job, marketing takes over as the most dominant position. And then you see a lot of them in sales. So this was the most sort of marketing specific degree we observed. You see much thicker banding at the top when we compare it to social science and liberal arts. Here we see the major themes of their work. It's not just the outcome, but these are their skills themes. So public relations is the strongest theme we've observed, then sales, and then you have the systems, marketing systems, and then digital marketing, and then digital media. So a lot of similar things here once we get into the marketing. But again, we can see the actual things they do in the market, which is super important as we think about program development and informing these students. We want to bring this data back to the program development and bring this back to the students when they're starting to learn.
And we see that the skills that they have, like in digital analytics and the last 2, they start to demonstrate higher skills than their peers from social science, because again, maybe they're as they were filling in their education, they took more targeted courses towards that. So knowing that can help a lot. Knowing the direction can help them beef up the courses during their
One of the things that we would recommend is if you have a liberal arts major or social science major and they're concerned about what they might do, knowing that many of them head into these strategic communications roles, we might want to start to introduce the concept earlier, right? Like Yustina was saying, it gives them a head start versus the comms major that might be more focused on it. Here's the business degree. Strong banding, a lot thicker at the top, many of them starting in sales. The biggest difference for the business degree is how many of them go into business and financial analysis and then accounting and tax-related financial work. So what was interesting to us is that the liberal arts and social science degree actually looks very similar to the business degree, except for this this point here. So that's, again, real notable. These are the major skills. So again, the strongest themes were the business and accounting, but we see sales and digital marketing. Here's our engineering student. Again, very thick at the top in terms of most of their outcomes are right here. But it was also interesting to see as many of them are going into actual sales. We see sales, we see marketing, we see management. Yeah.
And the business thing was interesting because I could imagine some very useful applications for young people who are trying to figure their plans out and say, okay, this is going to be very useful for you if you want to do accounting or financial analysis. If you just want to work in the business world,
yep,
there are many paths.
Yep, big time. Yeah, the business specialization definitely comes out in one category, and then everywhere else it just moves like like the liberal arts degree. All right, so here's our engineering, and what we see with their skills is what's kind of cool here is this probably doesn't surprise us. They're mechanical engineering, software development, sales probably surprises us a bit. But now that we get into their skills, the strongest theme for the engineer was they're doing product design. Then after that, quality management, more product development, and then even we see them doing a lot of construction management. So again, these are their strongest themes. Again, themes that we want to introduce earlier when they're thinking about, and they ask, what will I actually do in the labor market? Well, a lot of you will probably do product design, but let's talk about that. All right, what's this mean? In higher education, we've touched on this a little bit, but we think that this ultimately helps us think about the improvement of curriculum. And we can improve this curriculum by bringing skills perspective in earlier in the game, even as we construct programs, and then as we obviously advise students. A big focus for MZ is going to be around this idea of advising students and helping them personalize their education pathway with this type of data. We also think this builds flexibility into your requirements. You don't need to be too rigid or narrow. You can be okay with somebody learning English and making their way into the market. We don't want to be too rigid in our approach, and I think this data is leaning us more towards that idea. We think it's also important that students can actually just start to see the outcomes of their degrees. It's a huge question most schools get, right? What can I do with a degree in X? Well, more and more, we can just tell you. And that's big for parents, that's big for students, that's big for policymakers, and so on. For companies, this is all about helping build better thinking around where you recruit students, especially for those business roles. If you're super narrow, like you have to have a business degree in this one thing, or else we're not going to hire you. Well, that's probably not a good approach. You need to have a bit bigger perspective. Avoid being too narrow on degree requirements is our major observation here. If you're a business struggling to find people for sales, marketing, and so on, you might need to take a closer look at your history majors.
And actually, many of them will, as we move more towards the skill approach, they may be missing out on better talent by just looking, all those filters that they have applied can actually be removing very, very big talent opportunities from their side.
Yep, big time. And then the final thing, and we're going to expand more on that piece, on how companies need to think about this, but again, we hope this is a good introduction to many of these conversations. For regions, I think it's cool because this is helpful to develop talent according to accurate information, right? Now, if you are a regional developer, a workforce, or an economic developer, you can actually start to look at, what are things looking like for us in Boise or Des Moines or Washington, D.C. You can tailor things more according to region now. It gives you a more complete picture of the local workforce to foster business development and attraction. Businesses are struggling to hire marketing, and you feel like, well, we don't have a dearth of like business degrees that we can pull from. Well, maybe you need to start going and look at the liberal arts colleges around you, right? This is a good way to help fill business demand by helping companies know where they should find talent. So if the company isn't looking at this data, you can look at it as a economic developer and say, hey, look, let us help you think about this in a new way. Upskilling is a big issue in the public sector for the regional development, and a big theme for us is this idea of upskilling adults, upskilling more and more people. Maybe they already work in a company and they need to go get some more skills. Maybe they are an engineer and they need to get some more of these management skills. That's another facet of this. And then it's really a new way to help determine the unique skills of regions. Regions have unique value. They have unique things they can bring to bear, and they need to get behind those strengths, and sometimes it's hard to see them. So this data helps us see that too. And there's a lot more coming in that area too. All right. So again, let me give you a few next steps, and then if anybody has questions, we'll answer those. And then if you want to talk offline or about any of these things, we can set that up too. But here's 3 things to think about. Now that we have a national benchmark for the outcomes of these different degrees, and there's still more to do. We only did 6, but now that we have this national benchmark, we want to encourage more schools to think about their own benchmark against this, right? So we're mapping and matching our resume and profile data to college completer data, so we can actually say, what is the outcomes of your specific social science degrees versus the national sample that we took. We think that's interesting because then you have something to bounce your data off of. Is this good or bad? Are we high or low? Do we see more of our people going into STEM areas than we thought they would be? Do we see more of them going to management than the national benchmark showed? So that's a good step to take. Another big thing we're doing is this idea of mapping curriculum to skills, and then also so we can see how the curriculum ends up in a skills cluster. So we've already kind of started the 4A, entered this projects in a couple places, and it's already very promising. Yustina, anything to add to that?
Actually, yes. This is the common theme that we have been trying to bring to bear is as you're designing those curricula, or even trying to figure out what kind of program should we be offering, what kind of program should we be dropping, and instead of again looking at just very abstract codes with the skill mapping approach, and then mapping these courses to actually the outside demand, the roles that the employers are asking for right now, we believe that this can bring huge opportunities in terms of always making these curricula fresh and on point. And not only that, but also seeing who to recruit for which kind of program. And that is very critical for employers. Sometimes they don't just want people with cloud computing skills, for example. They want supply chain managers with cloud computing skills. So that combination we're seeing more and more of, and these hybrid roles are becoming the norm more and more, and hopefully we can help institutions plan for that.
Yep. It's a way to nuance your program development in a way that has always been hard until now. And the final piece is, where the rubber meets the road for many of us is actually helping students or helping job seekers be better informed. And here, what we're doing is talking about the idea of skills matching, right? We want to help students evaluate their own skills so they can personalize their learning and working pathways. And we think this relates to obviously how you would interact with a student, but also think about an incumbent worker or a job seeker who needs to upskill. And so these are our 3 sort of approaches, and you're going to hear more about this. We have our conference coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking a lot about this. There's going to be more research coming from us. There's more product development going on, but these are some of the big themes that we're working on. And if you want to talk to us about any of these ideas or concepts or things that you're working on, we'd love to discuss them and to get your thoughts on this work and how it can help you. So with that, a quick reminder again, a way to look at this is Our objective is to connect people, education, work. And, there's a number of things that we want to relate the demand signals in the market to curriculum. We want to help you better describe the outcomes of people in the market and relate the skills of your grads to work. And we want to help students relate their education and the skills back to in-demand needs in the market. We think this helps create the alignment that we're really after here at MZ. And we think this helps your organization. I mean, our goal is to help you all be very effective in what you do. It's not just about the data, it's about you getting results from it. We think this is the best way to approach these issues now. With that, I'm going to end it. We have a few more minutes for some questions. I think Claire's got a few that have come in. You can type a question into the little box and we'll try to get to it. If we can't get to all of them, we will try to blog it and then we'll send it out to everybody. Or you can just email me directly, and there's my email.
One of the questions we got was, and it's cutting off a little bit, so forgive me if I don't quite get it right, but if you were a marketer for a liberal arts college or a liberal arts college within a larger university, how would you use this data and this is the part where it cuts off, but I believe it's to convince companies to recruit more liberal arts, or to recruit more, how would you use this info to recruit more liberal arts majors?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So my answer to that one is, this is why I think our matching is so important. So we are working with schools so we have 125 million records that we can match to your completers. So we've been matching that data to your completers. And what it's doing is it's giving colleges and universities the ability to turn around and say, this is actually not only that they work in marketing, but here's who they work for, here's their actual job title, here's their actual skills, here's where they live, and so on. And with this information, you can go to an employer, and the employer might say, oh, we don't really hire liberal arts grads. And then you might be able to say, you've actually hired 50 of them, and 25 of them work for you in marketing. A lot of times they don't know that. And then to a student or a parent who might be concerned about the degree itself, and their concern generally relates to, you can't really get a job with that degree, we can say very simply, well, let me show you the outcomes of my students. 25 of them are working in marketing at this company. Oh, that's interesting. I think a big part of that too is, in the liberal arts programs, in the social science programs, you really need to communicate more about that reality, because people assume that there isn't that reality, and you need to build internships and you need to build relationships with those employers so that your students are starting to get that experience while they're still undergrads.
I have another question here. It's more about how we went about this, and the question is, did you look at people who went back and got more education or otherwise upskilled in some way? And the answer is that we restricted ourselves to people with a bachelor's being their highest level of education. I believe in Robot Ready, we looked more about what happens when liberal arts majors get a master's, and the answer is that they often, that's one of the ways they catch up to STEM grads. But for this, the purpose of this was just to look at what happens when people, just your sort of basic bachelors, go out into the labor market. And all the questions I'm getting, some of them I'll probably have to answer by email because there's so many, but all the questions about, do we include this, do we include that? One of the things that's exciting to me is how much more there is to say about all of this and how many different parameters you could apply and get so much more data. And to us, I think this was just scratching the surface, and to get so much information with just a very narrow parameter was very exciting.
Yeah, we tried to make it as narrow as we could, just to answer that fundamental question: is what do people with a social science degree actually do? So we didn't look at the grad degree, we didn't look at the anything else. It was just, let's just look at that one fixed location.
Right. Another question is, do we plan to do this kind of work for associate's degrees?
That's a great question. We haven't planned that yet, but that would be something that would be worth exploring, because now we can look at the bachelor's. We could do some sub-analysis around associates. So that's a good one to explore.
But actually, in some of our consulting work, Rob, and we're hoping to productize some of that, we looked at this. So big systems, and the system include 4-year degree as well as associates. And in some cases, we showed people that your associate's degree are getting really strong technical jobs here. These are combo engineering degrees, and some of them were surprised that we can see that level of detail.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Yustina.
Sure.
Good. Are there any ideas on how to start a meaningful conversation with businesses and the flexibility that they might need?
Yeah,
in workers?
That's a great question. So again, the idea of convincing employers to be more flexible, in their hiring, and that's a huge issue. There's a lot of things that affect employers that make them a bit more rigid. I mean, there's policy that makes it harder for them to be more expansive.
But if I may interject here, Rob, actually, just as we are doing all this analysis on the student side, the same exact one is being done on profile side. And a lot of our users now are asking, okay, tell me, I have no clue who is in our 4 doors. I don't even know, like, we have this title software engineer everywhere, and we have no clue what that is. So
Yep.
And it sounds scary, but it's very true, and some of them are very advanced companies. So if you do that, and you, instead of it like, why are you not hiring my major, hire them, you go in and you say, you are looking for software developers who are actually a lot on the graphic design and a lot on the marketing and a lot here, and have these programming languages like Python, Actually, this is exactly what we have. If you are a region, this is exactly what we offer. And basically, they are using degrees as a proxy. Yep. So if you cut that proxy and show actual data, I think the conversation will be very different.
Yeah, big time. Like you see, Yustina's point there is twofold. A, you can help companies look at their own headcount and say, what degrees have you actually hired from? And is that representative of what your postings are saying, right? Oh, our product team has a lot of people with liberal arts degrees, right? So, those people, if they were trying to apply for jobs today, probably wouldn't get hired. The other way to look at it is for schools to actually show businesses the outcomes of the students working those jobs. So you can start at the company level and help them better understand their own headcount, and you can start at the college level and help the business understand where students have actually gone. In both cases, like especially big companies, they don't know that intuitively. And again, I mean, it's kind of like what we did here. The data helps you have that conversation. The biggest point here is if you have the data, you can open up the door to a conversation, and it'll likely take time, right? You need to convince people of your argument, but the data is going to open up the door to having that conversation about how they could make some changes and get better headcount and talent.
Exactly.
Let's do one more.
Okay. One is very interesting. Do you have a strategy for understanding how skills learned in school are augmented through work-based learning in these jobs?
Do we have a strategy for that?
We actually can. For some of our users actually now are starting to give us their curricula. So imagine that we have their curricula and courses, and now this is the part where curriculum match to skills, match to roles. So you're seeing here's what you're teaching, and this is where the final destination of the programs you are teaching. And where they can start to see like a gap analysis. You're teaching these courses, but they're actually looking, this is a cyber certification, but you are missing that GIAC certification, which is becoming highly in demand, or others like that. So with that, as we are matching more and more curricula and creating that common language between education and skills, we are very close to doing that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Very cool. Well, we've taken up an hour of your time. We thank you so much for joining us. What we'll do is we'll capture these questions. I think we can answer them and put them out on our blog and share them with you all. and then we'll share this presentation. And again, we're very happy to meet with you, talk to you. There's a lot more to uncover here, but we thank you so much for your time. Hopefully it was helpful to you. All right, so with that, we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.